We started talking about ADD without hyperactivity, we called it back then. That was the first time I started thinking, oh, maybe there's more to this than hyperactivity, impulsivity, distractibility, because it really didn't describe women too much. I was starting to be able, even then, to see the difference in the women who were describing their massive problems with organization, how different they were from men who were describing the same problems but didn't feel the sense of shame. They didn't feel that same failure as a woman.
The surge in ADHD diagnosis in women that has happened recently, part of the question is what took so long? This is ADHD Aha, a podcast where people share the moment when it finally clicked that they have ADHD. I am honored to be here today in person with Sari Solden. Sari is a psychotherapist, an ADHD expert, and a trailblazer for women with ADHD. She is also the author of multiple best-selling books, including Women with Attention Deficit Disorder, which celebrates its 30th anniversary this year. Congratulations, Sari.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you so much for being here with me today.
My pleasure.
It really is such an honor. There's so much more I could have mentioned for your bio, but my working memory just isn't strong enough for me to, hold on to all of that information.
I get it.
But, before we get into the meat of your diagnosis story and all of the amazing work that you've done, I heard that you started a rock and roll school. Can you tell me about this?
Yeah, that was part of my ADHD journey. I went through many geographic moves and many, I worked at farm labor camps, mental hospitals, and before settling on the rock and roll music school in Marin County, California, where it was much of the same elements, though, helping young kids develop self-esteem and express themselves and help them, play in the band with other people, manage their hyperactivity.
That sounds really fun. All right, so take me to 1989. What were you doing in 1989?
1989. That's when my aha period started, I guess. I was working at an agency that had a couple special projects. One was minority mental health, which I was involved with. Lo and behold, I discovered, because I was looking for help for one of my clients in that project who had a learning disability, that they had the only program in the entire country, I think, for adults with learning disabilities that was part of a counseling agency, not a separate educational agency. So I transferred over to that project, and I had a lot of aha moments in between clients, searching through books in that office, trying to find out any reason for my massive disorganization that I had had my whole life. Here I was with my master's degree, counseling, all this seeming success, but yet I had this massive, chronic, severe problem with organization. So I was searching through all the books in between clients to see what was going on with me.
Can you give some examples of the disorganization challenges
Really?
you were facing? Yeah.
Well, my life, I call it TMS, time, money, and stuff. Mine actually was...
Time, money, and stuff?
Yeah, instead of PMS for women. Sort of clever.
Okay, great.
But for me, all my life, it was just clutter and accumulation of papers and stuff overflowing everywhere. Not hoarding, just not being able to figure out what to wear. As a girl, it was hard not to figure out what to wear. How do people know what went with what? And not being able to keep up in elementary school, even though I was really gifted. They put me in a program with kids who weren't gifted. By the time they corrected that problem, I was completely lost. So I couldn't handwrite, I couldn't spell. I had tutors for that. And I was just sort of humiliated by the teachers because I couldn't handwrite, basically. But I learned to compensate even back then. I remember as soon as it came to outlining in the 4th grade, I couldn't do that at all. So I turned every assignment into the dramatization of this is your life, Jane Eyre. I remember her quiz shows. I just acted out everything, and I found a way to excel, even though I couldn't do the organizing of my ideas.
Were teachers and people around you receptive to that?
Sure.
I'm not convinced.
Yeah. But one teacher, especially in the 7th grade, he kept saying, oh, this could have been done by a 2nd grader. This is a mess. He kept giving me bad marks on my spelling, even though I was spelling well. I just, he thought I couldn't handwrite at all. And I just couldn't figure out some of the things, even though in other ways I was really doing well. So it was confusing.
It sounds like you really carried that with you. There are a lot of feelings around that. I think that we have a habit as people, as a society, to kind of joke about disorganization, it's a Kathy comic, but it sounds like it created some like a lot of stress for you.
Oh, yeah. Well, even in college, it did create a big problem. We used to have meetings about me at the dorm, and my roommates used to call me a slob. I was messy my whole life.
Yeah.
And lived in a very structured household growing up. But when I went to college, it all fell apart because I couldn't manage all the executive function. I look back now and understand. It wasn't just about subject matter then. It was like how to get to the class, where to go, or, how to navigate all the organizational issues. So
adulting,
and how to live with other
multitasking.
people and how not, my disorganization was quite a problem then.
Yeah.
Nobody was helping me stay organized like they did when I was growing up.
Did you have self-awareness about your disorganization at that time?
Well,
Or did that
it didn't
come
take
later?
much, everybody knew,
Okay.
but it was
You'd
humiliating.
be surprised. Some people, even when it's really bad, they don't have that self-awareness. Yeah.
No, yeah. It was troublesome. People say, what's the difference between ADHD or, when it's a disorder, when it's like something
Right.
else. But, it was a problem. It was very difficult. It follows you everywhere. You take your brain with you everywhere. So I couldn't organize my clothes, my belongings. I wrote an essay about what it was like to go to camp where I loved camp, but we went every summer. But, you had inspection period. The head counselor would come around and look at your shelves and look at your messy, bed and all the sand all over the place. All these times where my disorganization was visible was always pretty humiliating for me. A child of my generation. When women really had a lot of expectations.
Yeah. So late 80s, early 90s.
Go back to that.
Yeah. No, that's great. So you're searching,
Okay,
you're
I'm
looking through
searching.
all the books,
Yeah,
you're trying to figure out what's going on with my
Right.
disorganization.
Right. So my first aha was I was treating women, though, and men who had learning disabilities now. Turns out some of those later on we realized had ADHD. But I was starting to be able, even then, to see the difference in the women who were describing their massive problems with organization, how different they were from men who were describing the same problems but didn't feel the sense of shame that I was just talking about now. They didn't feel that same failure as a woman. So that was my first, I'm identifying with some of these things that these women are saying. So that was in 89. And to run that program, I had to take a test, a learning disability test. It gave me these nonsensical looking space creatures with nonsensical names. And they would, go back and forth between one and the other, and then they expected me to remember a complete nonsensical name, and I absolutely couldn't remember. And I got like a 16th percentile on this test. It was the first time I ever saw in some kind of testing situation that I had a real severe problem with memory.
That's working memory.
Working memory, because I realized at that time that everything I was doing was through accommodation and context, and when there was no context, I had absolutely no memory. I couldn't imagine anybody being able to do this. So that was my first aha that, there is something maybe here going on. But nobody was really talking about memory problems at that point.
Yeah. Would you mind quickly defining working memory for people who might not know? Because it's not the same as short-term memory.
This was where I had to hold, they would say, this is, blah, blah, blah. And I had to remember long enough in my mind. I had to hold that while they flipped the card and they told me something else and they went back. So I was holding it in my brain long enough to use it. At that point, though, I had no idea what that meant. So I'm there working, and then a client of mine, a guy, actually came in and he handed me this little cassette that he had taped the night before from NPR. And he said, hey, this is an interview from these two guys from Harvard about a book they're writing about this thing called attention deficit disorder, which really had no idea about. And I went home. I remember listening to it. And it was the first time and it was Nat Hollowell and John Rady, turned out later on when they published their book.
Their book, Driven to Distraction.
Yeah, Driven to Distraction. But
at
at that point, it was just an interview they were doing about the subject. They hadn't written the book yet. It hadn't come out yet. And it said that the big aha was that adults can have this thing called attention deficit disorder, even though they lose their hyperactivity, that they still are, dealing with a lot of these issues. So that was the first light bulb that adults still had it.
Okay.
What was continuing to be problematic for me and for a lot of women is that even though that was exciting, most of the women never had hyperactivity. That sort of was confusing to us.
Yeah.
It was around that time that we started talking about ADD without hyperactivity, we called it back then. And that was the first time I started thinking, maybe there's more to this than the triad that they always talked about: hyperactivity, impulsivity, distractibility, because it really didn't describe women too
Yeah.
much. And so I think that's what led to my first big aha was when a new book came out after Driven to
Yes,
Distraction,
yes.
which is Peggy Raimundo and Kate Kelly wrote, You Mean I'm Not Stupid, Lazy, or Crazy? Stupid, crazy, there
Wait,
you go.
not lazy,
Lazy,
crazy,
stupid, no,
or
lazy,
stupid.
stupid, or crazy.
Either way, it doesn't
I
matter
got
the
it out.
order of
It
those
took me
words.
a
It's
long
perfect.
time.
Wait, I'm going to say it again. You mean
Lazy, stupid, and crazy.
you mean I'm not lazy, crazy, or stupid?
That was my true aha moment. That
That's
was
amazing.
amazing because nobody had really described before then what it was like. And those really more subtle cognitive, social communication ways for women.
That's like an OG aha moment.
It was. That was my real aha
So you're
moment.
already working in the field or an adjacent field,
Yes.
related
Learning disability field.
Learning disability field. And you are on the front lines of I get to read all these books first.
Yes.
I get to be the first person,
That's
and then you're like, I'm trying to find something about
That's
myself.
why I found
It's
it
amazing.
because everything was coming into this little office, so it was just amazing timing. And then I discovered they were having the first adult ADD conference ever in '93 in Ann Arbor, which is where I went to school. I was living in California, and that Kate and Peggy were going to be there. And I went by myself back to Ann Arbor to meet them and to hear them. So I was there just as an adult,
Yeah.
and not as a professional.
Not as a professional.
And that was what I wrote about in the book, that first book, what it was like for the first time for any of us to be in a room with hundreds of other adults with ADHD. That was when I realized at that point how much time we all spend hiding and passing for normal, because when you're in a room with hundreds of people all bumping and spilling and interrupting and talking over each other, but not just in a negative way, finding people who were really smart and could keep up with each other and just laughing. And it was the first time ever that we had all been in a room together like that. So that was a real turning point too.
So when did you actually get evaluated and diagnosed for?
So I think it was probably 92, maybe early 90s. Because nobody was really testing you for ADD very much back then. But I went to full neuropsychological testing because I had so many strange problems.
What ADHD stuff did they see?
They test a lot of memory things in these tests.
Okay.
But basically, when you have ADHD or learning disabilities, you're going to get a lot of scatter, they call it. So some of your tests will be high usually, and some of your tests will be low if you're having problems. And then you'll get a middle score. And a lot of people with ADHD get hung up because you're not going to get as high a score as your intelligence might warrant, because you're going to have some low scores.
Yeah, okay.
So, for instance, they were concerned about me when I finished because some of the subtests on the verbal abilities, I was a 99th percentile of verbal, because you can tell I'm verbal. But on some of the subtests about the performance, which means having to figure out how to load dishes. I used to always use it about that after that. See, here's my score. I can't load the dishwasher. I had a 90% spread between my highest score and my... So however you want to call that, maybe it was partly a learning disorder as well as ADHD. That was also enough to convince them that, yes, we're going to try you on some medication.
So you were diagnosed officially with
ADHD. And other minimal brain dysfunctions of other types probably. But that was the main thing I got out of that. And people weren't used to giving those kind of medications at that time. But I did.
To anybody or just to women?
To anybody.
To anybody.
This is when adults, this is very early 90s, adults, women.
It was just for kids.
It was,
boys.
The first time I tried the Ritalin, I was at Macy's. When I used to go into Macy's, I couldn't, it was a nightmare, of sounds and sights and smells, and I couldn't figure out what to do and where to go. So when I took the medication as a test and went into Macy's, it was like somebody was at central switchboard, and it was like everything was organized in my brain. And I came out afterwards and laughed and say, "Good news, honey, I can shop." But I started talking then, because I can organize more than a few words at once.
It helped you socially, too.
It helped me socially a lot. It helped more than anything. I could talk. It helped me professionally. So for the first time at the agency, I presented things. And then I started giving presentations. And so it just changed my life in terms of being able to talk and string words together and string sentences together. And
then ultimately changed millions of women's lives, because your ability to speak up and to, express yourself and feel clear about that
but it happened.
I'm going to assume helped you get to where you
it did.
where you
Without
went.
the medication, I wouldn't have been able to do that at all. And once you have the confidence, of doing those things, then, that just builds.
So one thing we haven't mentioned yet is that Sari is the star, I guess we can say, of one of the episodes of Climbing the Walls, our new limited podcast series. And the title of that episode is She Wrote the Book on ADHD Shame in Women. But one of the things was, I think it was you who talked about the, how medication ads like back in the day were about like getting women back in like to become better at housekeeping.
No, I said that about a client of mine. She went to a psychiatrist and he said, take this pill and when your house is clean, you're cured. I
Oh my
told
God.
that story. So it was like wrong on so many levels because...
Wait, that really happened?
Yeah, that was my client told me that. So early on, nobody really knew what they were giving you medication for if you were lucky enough to get it. I mean, that was assuming that the goal was to keep your house clean, but also of your life, and also that you'd be cured of, or you'd want to be cured of who you are. But how the women thing happened was, so I've been, by then, it was like 93 or something, and I've been working with women and tracking everything between the men and the women, the differences all those years. And again, that was what was the most startling, was the difference of the shame that the women were feeling, failures as women, as partners, as wives, as friends, because of the organization, and the difficulties of logistics of coordinating, prioritizing, sequencing, running the kids' lives, even at work, being in charge of the sunshine committees, they used to call it, like...
Wait, excuse me? The sunshine committee?
Yeah, like the women were only asked to do that, to write the...
Wait, what is a sunshine committee?
To bring sunshine into everybody's life, like to, be the one to like visit the people in the hospital, or write the...
I mean, these are nice things to do, but I don't like the name. I'm not here for
That's what it was. Yeah.
Okay.
And the men weren't really on those committees, but the women. So the women had to take on all those niceties of life, as I call it in the book, the job description for women, the basic job description that I talk about in that book, to take care of everybody else's needs. And that's what women buy into and internalize. And when they fail in their own minds and compare themselves to other women, that's what causes these shame spirals that stay with them for years and years.
The
and
shame
years.
spiral.
Yeah.
Would you be open to talking about some feelings of shame that you've experienced in your life that are related to your ADHD?
Well, I mean, so as I was reviewing what happened to me, I was writing the book by then, and I started coming out to do professional speeches in Michigan for the first time, introducing the idea of women with ADHD. And the first speech I gave was in December of 93. And the leader of the organization introduced me to the new people in my life here, the big general public, because my husband was going to be speaking too. He said my husband was going to be talking about what it's like to be married to a woman with ADHD. And even though I had been talking about shame and everything, I still wasn't out at all. I was still just under my professional guise. And so when he said that, it was like he could have announced that I was, a criminal or something. I was so, because we hadn't agreed about that, and I never was talking about that in front of people or putting it out there. So
what were you worried that people would think?
At that point, it was like divulging that you had a terrible flaw, like you were this was something really hidden for many years. But when I wrote the book, then I got over all that, because then I was out. I outed myself then. And so there was no more power, that anybody could have over me. But back then, when I moved to Michigan and tried to find a pharmacy to fill the medication, they wouldn't tell you if they carried medications, because they were afraid that you were casing the joint, like you were a drug addict. I mean, it was pretty severe
Drug
back then
seeking.
to try.
That still happens, but that sounds potentially even more severe.
Yeah, it was severe. And so this was in the early 90s still.
What kind of feedback did you get from women about your book?
When my book came out in 95, it's funny, Ann Arbor turned out to be a hotbed in the whole Metro Detroit area of a lot of professionals and a lot of people with ADHD. The early days of that were amazing. The first couple of years were so magical, of all these conferences, and there was music in the halls, and the bad girl after hours things with the girls confessing all these things, and people running around doing all sorts of things. It was fun. So that was the first big wave. It wasn't really about women. When I wrote the book in 95, that was like a huge, believe me, I'm an accidental radical. I call myself, I had no idea that I was saying something that was different than, anybody else would say. I was just
amazing.
saying what I saw all those years.
Climbing the Walls is really about this surge in ADHD diagnosis in women that has happened recently. Part of the question is what took so long,
Right.
right? Because this is the pandemic from 2020 to, where we are now, the sharp increase in diagnoses. Your book came out in 1995.
Right.
Why did it take so long,
Well,
Sari?
I didn't know it took so long. I mean, it's
Because you
been
were in
steady.
it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, but I understood Danielle's point was like the people who started to get diagnosed at the pandemic didn't know
Yeah.
because, there wasn't this kind of accident. It was because of TikTok, I guess, and in my time, it was a slow build and talking to each other. Now, I guess it's escalated so much that the amount of information that and influence people are having on each other and the information out there. So the pandemic was a huge thing, and young people just thought it was a new thing. But when she was
Exactly.
amazed to find out that the same thing that helped her, one of my books, was the same thing that helped this other woman that she interviews on the podcast, 30 years ago. So
Yeah.
she was trying to bridge those gaps. And it's just been a slow, steady build over these years. And now it's a floodgate that she's trying to understand. Is it overdiagnosed? Is it still underdiagnosed? She's trying to sort that out on
And
Climbing
how
the
do we
Walls.
support all these women who now have this diagnosis, but maybe the research really and the support hasn't really caught up with?
Right. But it's still, I would still guess it's underdiagnosed.
Yeah.
I'm not sure everybody's accurately diagnosed, but it's still, there's a lot of women who actually do suffer a lot, who have amazing strengths. I view it as a yes and.
Yeah.
They have strengths and they have difficulties.
Yeah.
And, my job has been as a therapist for 35 years to help women sort of integrate those two sides, to live peacefully with their difficulties, but not get caught up in just getting fixed and getting over who they are, but just,
Yeah.
going forward with all of who they are and being all of who they are, is a passion of mine to help women
Do you ever just sit back with a cup of coffee or
every day.
a beer? Yeah, whatever your pleasure is,
Yeah.
and just like, I kind of did all of this.
Not really. I have to really work hard at taking that in. I really
Yeah.
have to work hard. But I always say because of all my problems, I never developed the arrogance of people that develop, for whom things come easy. I never developed that arrogance. So I work hard at taking in all the good things people are saying about the influence I had, but it really never comes in very deeply,
Well, let me try. Let me give it a shot,
Okay.
Sari, because I'm just picturing you going through all of these books that are coming into you and trying to figure out what's going on with yourself. And are you getting a little teary-eyed?
Yeah, that's sweet.
Yeah, no, but truly, and doing what you did and being the trailblazer that you are, which was just a natural thing, it sounds like, for you to do. You were on this path of
I didn't know what else
self-discovery.
to do, yeah.
Getting diagnosed with ADHD changed my life. It helped me understand myself. It's not like having a label fixes everything, but it's about understanding yourself, right? My daughter was recently diagnosed with ADHD, and that has really changed our lives to have this knowledge about her. It's made our lives better. And I know that none of this would have happened without you.
So weird.
It's kind of, I really meant it when I said it's an honor
Yeah,
to be here
thank
with you
you.
today in person. And then thank you so much for coming on Climbing the Walls. How was that experience for you?
That was really fun.
Yeah.
I wasn't aware of the mic, so we just talked for many hours, and I was very open, and it was great to spend the time with Danielle. And most of these years, I've given very polished presentations, so it was a little startling, to hear the real me.
Yeah.
Like I am in real life. I sometimes ask myself how it happened. I talked about. I turned around one side. I'm with Harvard and Yale, me, Tom Brown, Hollowell, we're all up there together. I was very accepted by a wide group of highly, academic, men and professionals who really embraced me. There was just a few, I just want to correct that, in Climbing the Walls, there was just a few people and
Yeah.
a few groups that were wanting to keep all this,
Keep the power.
Yeah. But I just want to say, I owe a lot to a lot of men and women who came before me and helping me, especially learn how to write a book. Edna Copeland and Stephen Copps, they were very early pioneers in the field. And Edna is the one that told me before computers how to I would have to take all my thousands of ideas that were in boxes in the basement and how to literally cut and paste them, cut them into paper bags in different categories and brown paper bags, and figure out how to cut them together and piece them into a book. It was a very difficult task, writing that book. It was Ritalin in the OJ trial. I moved to, no, really, it's the truth. I moved to Michigan. I didn't know anybody. It was dark. It was depressed. And we didn't have VCRs, I don't think, even so. OJ trial was on. I would go up in this little rented house and write, take Ritalin, go down and watch the OJ trial, go back. As I did that for several months. We didn't have email, so I would have to FedEx copies back to my publisher in California, and then he would FedEx them back. It was quite an ordeal, My husband helped a lot, piecing it together, and then it
like
had
literally piecing it together.
Literally, and it was just beautiful. This was very healing for me personally. When you ask about the effect, all of a sudden this book came out in '95, and it was beloved, and I traveled all over the world for many years, and women all over the world, really loved it. So I was seen and heard and understood and valued, and it was after being quiet and shy and hiding all those years.
Well, I'm so glad. I get a lot of emails from listeners who write in, and they share a lot of gratitude for the show, and I want them to know that this doesn't exist without you.
Thank you.
Right. Do you have any advice for women with ADHD who maybe were recently diagnosed, or any words of wisdom?
Yeah, just keep on going. Find somebody who can see you and hear you and value you. Get a good therapist. Doesn't have to be an ADD expert. Someone who's a good therapist who can see you and help you emerge, and not wait to be fixed, not wait to get over who you are, but just have two parallel paths. One about your chronic problems with your brain, your executive function, take medication, get a coach, but then that's not the whole journey. The journey is for you to be yourself and to contribute and have a fulfilling, meaningful life with ADHD.
Thank you so much. Is there anything else that you want to share before we sign off?
No, that's it. Thank you so much for saying all your kind words.
Oh, thank you for everything that you've done, Sari. This is fun. Thank you for being on our new set with us today.
Beautiful. I'm thrilled.
Yeah. So thank you again. You're just so fantastic.
Thanks,
Everybody
Laura.
go listen to Climbing the Walls.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Laura.